All right, so before we begin, I would just like to state for the record that today is July 8th, 2021, and my name is Ben Bauman, and I'm here in Indianapolis, Indiana, and I'm speaking via phone with Dr. Kevin Ford, who is in Houston, Texas, and we are doing an interview for the Indiana Astronaut Oral History Project. So just starting off, when and where were you born?
I was born in Portland, Indiana. That's in Jay County, in July of 1960. So yesterday was my birthday, July 7th, 1960. But my parents had already moved to Blackford County. My mom was familiar with the doctors and hospital back over in Jay County, so she went back to give birth to me. But I really started life and was brought home to a house in Montpelier, Indiana.
Oh, okay. And what were your parents' names?
My mom's name was Barbara, and my father's name was Clayton.
Okay.
So last name Ford, and my mother's maiden name was McVicker.
Okay. And where was your family from before Indiana?
You know, they were both born in Indiana, and actually in Hartford City, Indiana. So they were there from birth. So ancestry from various parts of Europe.
Sure, okay, yeah.
Originally, but they were born in Blackford County, Indiana.
Okay, cool. And what were your parents' occupations?
My dad was a farmer when I was born. Later worked as a machinist in the automotive industry, and was a bit of a union leader for the AFL-CIO. And in Marion, Indiana, he worked for Dana Corporation. It's departed. Kind of changed its face in the modern day, but they made universal joints and drive shafts and so forth. And he worked there from about the age of 6. When I was about 6 years old, he worked in Marion and did that job. And I think helped out with some farming though too in the local community. So delivered mail for a while also from our own car when I was younger, and can remember going on the route with him sometimes early mornings. So that's what he did, and my mom was a homemaker. So we had six children in the family. So she took care of the home life. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Mm-hmm. And how would you describe your childhood?
How would I describe it? I was the youngest of 6, so it was a busy household. 3 older brothers, 2 older sisters. Lived in the town of Montpelier on Main Street, actually, pretty close to the center of a town of 2,000 people, and had a lot of neighborhood friends, and kind of had the run of the town. You know, as I grew up, as I was 10 and 11, used to just ride my bike to my Little League games and back home again, after dark and so forth. So we had a stone quarry in the corner of Montpelier that we could go out and play on the sides of the gravel hills. And we had a train that came through town every day and places to ride bikes, and we had the Salamone River that passed through town. So a lot of adventure there for me as a young kid growing up, and a lot of really good friends there.
Yeah, that sounds really nice.
Yeah.
Who would you say was the most influential person in your childhood?
I would, I'd probably have to say my mother was, in terms of academia, kind of helping me get things done and choose the kinds of things I wanted to work on and facilitating all those things. So my dad left pretty early morning and came home about 4:30 in the afternoon or so. And of course, the father has always been very influential too. Yeah. But personally, for me, my mother. In terms of my career and where I went, my older brothers are kind of technically oriented, and my oldest brother, David, was a political science major, but he was interested in flying and so forth, and he got his private pilot's license when he was quite young, when he was in college.
Oh, wow.
And introduced me to flying. So my very first flight, I took off from a little field there in Blackford County. I think it was called Inman Field at the time, right near where the high school is now in Blackford County, and he took me for a ride in an airplane. We flew down to Indianapolis Metropolitan Airport. Wow. That was my first introduction to flying. So, and then of course I say it because flying ended up being a big part of my career.
Yeah.
The flying that got me into the astronaut field.
Yeah.
Actually, so in terms of career, but my older brothers. also kind of influenced me in terms of engineering decisions and being interested in math and sciences and so forth too. So and then my sisters were closer in age to me, so they of course had a lot of influence on me too.
Yeah, of course.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, what would you say were your strongest interests as a child?
I think I enjoyed the outdoors, and I always did enjoy learning things and seeing new things, and looking under this rock or that rock. And when I had the chance to travel, we didn't travel very much as a family because of the number of kids, I think, and so many things going on, and our financial situation. In the 60s, things were just different. But I enjoyed traveling with a few friends to a few places, and I knew I really wanted to see more of the world and so forth. But I was always interested in math and the sciences and these sorts of things mostly.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Now, what understanding, if any, did you have about outer space as a child? Did you think much about it, or?
Well, I remember July 20th, 69, when the Apollo 11 crew stepped out onto the surface of the moon, and it was my mom who said, "Hey, this is going to happen. I'm going to let you stay up late tonight," because I don't know if you remember, the walk was supposed to happen the next day. And then I go, "Oh, you know what? They changed their mind. They're there. They're not sleepy. They're going to go out and do their spacewalk, so their moonwalk." And so I got to stay up late to watch that. But I do remember them. It was like on TV already, and she's like, "Well, you still got to go get your bath, your shower, or whatever it was before this." And that was the fastest one I ever took.
Yeah.
And I can remember the rug I sat on, and I just sat in front of the TV with my legs crossed on the floor, watching that. And I remember that. I don't remember too much about the Mercury and Gemini until after that. And then I went back and looked at some of the history and started to read more about space and learned about the Russian space program also, and just kind of where it had been. But I didn't really look at it as something as a career choice then. Honestly, I just looked at it as a fascination for that.
Yeah.
Space, like a lot of people do. Mm-hmm.
Right. And so, when did you first know that you wanted to be an astronaut?
That's a difficult question too, because I do remember thinking how fascinating it would be, but never considered it within my grasp.
Yeah.
I did think after my brother introduced me to flying and so forth, that I learned I could go take lessons at the Marion Airport if I wanted to, and I investigated how much they would cost, and where could I get a job to pay for that. And I didn't really think hey, I'll make it to astronaut or anything. I just wanted to have good enough eyes to fly airplanes, and then and good enough health and qualification to maybe fly Air Force airplanes, after I learned about fighters and so forth, and the high-tech machinery they had, and, at some of the more advanced levels of flying and stuff like that. So, but I decided when I was about 16, I wanted to try to get my pilot's license, and I knew about what it would cost. It was about $25 an hour then, to rent a plane, maybe extra 10 if you had an instructor.
Yeah.
So, and I kind of baled hay. That's how I made money, and delivered newspapers. So that wasn't quite enough to cut it, and I applied for a job at a local grocery store. Tom Williams was the grocer, and he kind of interviewed me, to be a sack boy, and work behind the meat counter and stuff, a little bit, stock the shelves. And he said, "What are you going to do with the money?" And I said, "I'm going to take flying lessons." He goes, "Oh, really? Okay." And I got a call a couple of days later and said, "You got the job." And then when I went to work, I found out he is a private pilot and owned an airplane.
Wow.
and which was a little unusual back then. Not too many. There's probably maybe 5 or 10 people in my whole county who would have even had a pilot's license, and he had his own tri-pacer. He hired me because of that answer. I was going to use it for flying, and if he hadn't been a pilot, somebody else might have got the job. And,
sure.
But I was very lucky that he was interested in that. And he used to stand behind that meat counter with me and tell me little ways to remember stuff about flying, and tell me his tricks of the trade.
Oh, that's cool.
It's really great to have him as a mentor for my initial flying experience too.
Yeah, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
How would you describe your educational experiences growing up with all those different schools you went to and stuff?
Yeah, sometimes I get in trouble when I go talk to schools and I tell them I wasn't really that great a student. The teachers don't want me to say that, right? They want me to say you really worked hard. And
right.
You didn't horse around in class, So in junior high, I was a B student, a C student, kind of. It wasn't because the material was hard so much as just my study habits and kind of my interest in playing and other things that adolescents, are involved with and so forth. So I would rather go fishing, than do my homework, for example. And I did that many times.
Yeah.
So I wasn't. But then in high school, I did start to work a little bit harder. I did know about in high school time frame that I really like to fly, and so maybe having a background in math and science, I should take all the math I can. If high school offers calculus, I shouldn't stop with algebra. I should get all I can. And also about in there somewhere, I decided, I think maybe I'd like to major in engineering in university. So I did take more math and science. And then I started to put a little bit more effort into trying to learn to study. But I honestly didn't really learn to study hard until I got to university. When I did go from Blackford to, I was able to get into Notre Dame, probably with the help of some alumni and my hometown priest.
Yeah.
And so I somehow miraculously got admitted up there, and I got up there and learned the first semester what I was up against in terms of academic ability for people all over the country and so forth. And I had about a B- average the first semester. I'm like, wow, shooting baskets with the Nerf ball in the hallway all evening and stuff isn't going to get me where I need to go. And so I started going to the library every night.
Yeah.
And started really learning how to study and actually read material ahead of the class instead of trying to catch up to what had been said later.
Yeah.
And when I got to the library, I saw all those other students over there, and I thought, wow, these people are really studying. I guess that's the ticket. So that's when I kind of stepped it up, and I actually started to enjoy that. So I ended up every semester at Notre Dame, I raised my GPA. So it was high enough at the end that I was qualified for pilot training, and then qualified for some degrees later on. And the astronaut, they actually looked at those grades in front of me when I interviewed to be an astronaut. So it's a good thing. They didn't look at my high school grades.
Yeah.
But they looked at my undergraduate years and on. So it's a good thing that's where I decided to really put the pedal to the metal, as we say, and kind of push it up.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So I was a slow starter, but I was fortunate that I enjoyed the education too. So I went on and got a few advanced degrees even after my bachelor's, and it was mostly just because the Air Force was willing to pay for it. In some cases, if you want to do it, we'll pay 90%. And I enjoyed the material, and I enjoyed the people that taught it, and I just did it mostly because I wanted to, really not to build a resume for astronaut or anything. I just did it because I enjoyed it.
Sure. Yeah. No, that's cool. I'd like to talk a little bit more about your academic career in college and stuff. But I have one more question actually about your childhood. What were your views about the state of Indiana or about being a Hoosier growing up?
Never really thought about it before. It was my world, you know.
Yeah.
It's still my world. When I come back there, I just, it feels right. When I drive through the cornfields and stuff in northeastern Indiana, I think about, what my dad would have said about him. You can, hey, in a quiet night, you can hear the corn grow.
Yeah.
Corn knee high by the 4th of July is good corn, he used to say. So all those things, that was my world. That's kind of what I knew, and I was proud of it, and I liked the people, and there was a lot of integrity in my town. The men in my town were all, they respected each other, and we had a volunteer fire department and probably police department too, although I'm not sure. But
yeah,
it was a very positive view of the way things were, and I liked the high school sports and all those things. So I'm not sure exactly how to answer. I'll think of some things after we talk, probably, that I wish I had said, but I wouldn't choose to grow up anywhere else at this point. I'm glad I did grow up there.
Yeah, no, I think it's a good answer. Yeah, it's interesting. So at Notre Dame, what was your major?
I majored in aerospace engineering. So
okay.
my second oldest brother, Dean, he kind of convinced me engineering was the way to go, and he had been a mechanical engineer. He went to Rose, what's called then I think Rose Poly, but now Rose Holman or something. Maybe it's even changed names by now in Terre Haute.
Yeah.
So he had a lot of influence on me in terms of enjoying the math and the engineering, and to this day I send him interesting things I've learned. Did you know this?
Yeah.
And so forth. I've been doing, even within the last week, I've done it. I've done it twice. But he said, you need to major in mechanical engineering. And I said, you know what? I want to fly airplanes. I'm going to do aerospace. And he said, well, anything an aerospace engineer can do, a mechanical can do too. But then we can do more, than just airplanes. And I said, now I want to get all the aerodynamics courses I can, and flight dynamics and stuff like that. And I'm kind of glad they did it, because I was interested then in each of those courses. They were meaningful to me, and I knew that I would apply it when I finished at the university.
Yeah, that's interesting. Were your parents surprised that you and your brother had such strong interests in engineering and piloting, since that's not probably a common interest for kids in general?
Were they surprised? Yeah, I think they probably were. I did take my parents both flying in an airplane when I was a 17-year-old private pilot. I don't know what they were thinking, to get in that airplane with me. but I did. I remember flying from Marion down to Columbus, Indiana, and back, and we came back after dark one night. I had my sister in there too, and they enjoyed and were fascinated by the flying that had never been part of their lives. So I think they recognized that my brother's interests kind of rubbed off on me, just a little bit there, and so they were happy about it. In fact, my mother gave me, for my 16th birthday, she gave me $20 and an envelope that said good for one flying lesson.
Ooh, okay.
And I remember that, and even though she didn't know what that meant, and she didn't know that, down the road she would be sitting at Kennedy Space Center at midnight watching me lift off in a space shuttle someday. But before I did that, when I flew in space, I said, Mom, I would have never even thought of flying if you hadn't given me that money and told me it was for a flying lesson. It hadn't even crossed my mind at that point. She said, oh, that's not true. You had talked about flying here, for the last couple of years. So, and she was nervous, of course, about the space flying.
Oh,
and stuff,
sure, I bet.
As any mother would be. So I think one of the downsides of flying in space like that is that it does have some impact on other loved ones in your life, and you have to be thankful that they're willing to put up with that.
Oh yeah, I bet. not everyone sees a family member leave the planet, so.
Yeah, and shuttle launch especially, it was such a big vehicle, and
Yeah.
it was so impactful in terms of the noise and the vibrations and stuff that you just think that nobody could survive that the first time you see it.
Yeah. Oh, sure.
So she was a bit nervous until I got home safely from that flight. But I did put them through a lot of things. I think the years I flew, and they came to visit me, in my early career as a fighter pilot too, and watched me fly out of bases and stuff in the F-15 and F-16. So
yeah,
they probably always were biting their nails just a little bit having a kid doing that.
Yeah, sure. No, that makes sense. And I mean, wasn't there even an accident on an earlier space flight, like one where one blew up right before, or something that, like a few months before you were supposed to take off, that delayed your first takeoff?
Yeah, the first accident, the Challenger accident, that had the school teacher on board. I mentioned her because most people remember that part about Challenger.
Right.
That was in the 80s, and I was a pilot then, and then there was this accident after I became an astronaut in 2000.
Yeah,
that was an accident in Columbia.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was 2003 that they were lost on entry over Texas. They broke up mostly. Well, a little further west, the pieces came down in Texas. And I was an astronaut then, and I was, coming up toward a flight some years down the road. It probably would have been in 2005 or so.
Yeah.
But that accident caused us to pause and retool and figure out what happened and go at it in a safer way. So I ended up flying in 2009. So so that probably didn't help either, right?
Yeah, I'm sure that
it happened.
Yeah, adds to the anxiety.
Sure. Yeah.
Now let's see. So right after you graduated from Notre Dame, what's your thought process about what you're going to do next?
So the whole time I was at Notre Dame, I was in the ROTC, Reserve Officer Training Corps, and I had been, when I took that, I actually got a scholarship to Notre Dame. My family situation wouldn't have allowed, the financial situation wouldn't have allowed me to go to Notre Dame, probably, except I got this scholarship to go there. And so I took this Reserve Officer Training Corps program course, and then beginning junior year, I was really kind of obligated to go in the Air Force. And I had been given cadet wings, which meant, okay, you've passed some aptitude tests, and everything we see with your health and everything means you're qualified to go be a pilot. If nothing changes, you'll get to be a pilot. So I was really kind of, those last couple of years, I knew I was going to the Air Force, and I was really hoping, when my graduation and commissioning finally came, that I would be able to go on to pilot training. So I was just kind of focused on making sure nothing interfered with that, and to get started in what was called Air Force undergraduate pilot training. So graduated in May from Notre Dame in 1982, and then they gave me a pilot training start date in Mississippi for late October. So took a job out at Edwards Air Force Base as a civil servant, just low paid kind of introductory help, and worked on some flight test programs out there. And it was just kind of, they offered a few jobs for people who had delays going to active duty, because they knew we graduated from college, right?
Yeah.
And we had some period of time. Not everybody can go in June, right, to pilot training. They start them throughout the year, so it takes some time before they're ready to bring you on board, put you in the training pipeline. So I took this job in flight test out at Edwards Air Force Base, California. The comment, I was like, wow, it's way out in California. You can probably get a job here at Wright-Patterson if you want.
Yeah, sure.
No, it doesn't matter. I'll drive out to California and take a job out there. And that was the first time I'd been out there. I ended up living there like a couple more times, in my career. So I probably spent 6 or 7 years total in the high desert, the Mojave Desert in California, ultimately. But that was the exposure to flight test before I went to pilot training even, which kind of motivated me a little bit to say, hey, you know what, I got an engineering degree. If I do well enough in pilot training, maybe someday I can come back here and be a test pilot.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's kind of, it was busy time and everything, but it kind of got me started down this flight testing track. So
Yeah, that's
which
cool.
I still find very interesting today. I participate in seminars and members of organizations in flight testing business. It has nothing to do with astronautics, really. It has nothing to do with kind of line pilot flying. It has more to do with how you test airplanes and systems and make them better for pilots and so forth.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess looking back at your college experiences, how do you view them? Whether you think they're like really crucial to your development then?
Yeah. The Notre Dame, I'm really glad I went there because, like I said, I graduated pretty high in my high school class, but for some reason, without the effort that was required to do well at Notre Dame, I didn't have to do any extra practice problems. If I did my homework in high school, sometimes I could do it on the bus on the way to school and so forth. So I did learn the fundamentals of everything I needed to know, but to really excel and get the grades and the knowledge I needed, it took a really tough semester at Notre Dame where I was really, really happy to get C's. And but by the end of the semester, I was like, I knew how I did on exams, and I knew how the performance of other students,
Yeah.
and at that level, and that's where I said, what, I got to do something different, or they're gonna kick me out of this university.
Yeah, sure.
So that really helped me turn the corner on work ethic a little bit. That's where I finally got the big picture on that one. So those college years were pretty crucial. And of course, I've had some connections to Notre Dame ever since with the professors that I knew there and the students, other students, and so forth. And many of them went into the service also. So I've seen them in the field, in the Air Force, and in the Navy, and so forth. And
yeah, that's cool.
And even back at NASA in my class of astronauts, there was another Notre Dame grad that was just 2 years younger than me. So
right. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And did your interest in space grow at all at that time, or were you still just kind of not really picturing yourself getting involved with anything like being an astronaut? Or
yeah, still didn't have any idea that I could pull that off.
Yeah,
to do the astronaut thing.
Sure.
Shuttle was going on, and we all knew, but the kind of people who got to fly space shuttles, that didn't seem like anything close to where I was as a college student, and having not even been to pilot training yet.
Right.
And stuff in college.
Yeah.
So I didn't know kind of what I was up against. The astronaut thing really didn't kind of come on in my brain until I was a test pilot, and I was working with some test pilots who were applying to be astronauts. And I thought, what's that all about? And they go, yeah, I applied to be a space shuttle pilot. So, of course, they're all applying, so they're like, yeah, you probably don't need to apply. You probably don't have enough experience yet, and so forth. But but that's kind of where they were still flying space shuttles, and they used pilots. Space shuttle had really two pilots on the flight deck, and they at that point were still just hiring test pilots. So
okay,
that's kind of when the space started. Now I did have some space courses at Notre Dame, but they were orbital mechanics courses, and how stars form and these kinds of things. Not anything really concrete about spacecraft or anything like that.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So let's see. It seems like then you were well into the Air Force and doing lots of different things flying before you really started to think about becoming an astronaut. At what point did you start thinking about becoming an astronaut?
Yeah, so just a quick recap one. Like after I did it takes about 1 year to get your pilot wings for the Air Force.
Yeah.
And in the course of that year, they kind of decide where you're headed. Are you going to go fly cargo aircraft, C-141, C-5s? Are you going to be an instructor back in the school, or maybe get a fighter? Fighters were kind of hard to come by. A lot of people kind of, were just interested in the hottest jets, just the way it used to be. And
Yeah.
so I was fortunate enough to do well enough in my class to get an F-15.
Yeah.
So I took they sent me to a school in New Mexico, which is called Lead-In Fighter Training, which we did in the same airplanes that we had just flown, the T-38. So it wasn't a new airplane to us, but it was completely new, a new art, if you will, the art of being a fighter pilot, the formation you fly, how air combat is what it is, why you have to do it, how you do it, all these kinds of things, and T-38s. And then you go to F-15 school, and that was in Phoenix, Arizona at Luke Air Force Base, 5 months in F-15 school. And again, not just the airplane, but air-to-air refueling, for example, intercept techniques with using a radar. My previous airplanes didn't have a radar system or any kind of combat systems. So it was a lot to learn in that 5 months, not just how to fly that particular airplane and land it. There's a lot more to it than that. And then after that, you go to your first base, and I went to Germany. So I went to Bitburg, Germany, and I had a 3-year tour in the F-15 there. While I was there, it just kind of, again, when you're there, you're trying to make the best of it and do all that stuff, get all the experiences you can. And I did check out to do these things called functional check flights.
Okay.
So if they thought you were proficient enough, this is when they put an airplane all back together, and it has to go fly again for the first time.
Oh, wow.
Right? They changed out both engines, or the gear. They landed it with the gear up last time. They fixed the gear, and somebody's got to go fly it again and check it out. So, and on those flight profiles, we get to do everything. You put down the gear with the emergency system. You shut down and restart both engines in the air. Right?
Yeah.
And you get to take it out to like Mach 1.5. I even took one of them to Mach 2 once.
Jeez.
Over Germany in an F-15. So I enjoyed doing that, and having done that, I got to know a guy there named George Muller who had been a test pilot too. He'd already been through the test pilot school and everything, and he did these check flights, and he was one of the more senior leaders there. And he talked to me a lot about flight tests. So I started getting interested in maybe going to test pilot school as soon as I could. To go to test pilot school, you had to have at least 1,000 hours already in the field in a fighter as pilot in command. So in a fighter, and that takes about 5 years or so to get there. So I did another assignment in the F-15. After that, I just went from Germany to Iceland. So, and flew F-15s out of Keflavik, Iceland for a couple of years. And even though I didn't have the 1,000 hours quite yet at the time for the applications for test pilot school, I promised them that I would have it before the first class dates.
Yeah.
At the pace I was on, so wrote some letters. Had that George Muller write me a recommendation letter and stuff for test pilot school, and then got assigned to a class as a pretty young pilot, really, to the test pilot school out at Edwards Air Force Base. So, and that's an engineering course with flying built into it.
Okay.
So it's a little of both. You actually fly and have 3 hours of engineering classes every day for a year.
Oh, wow.
So, and it's really a neat course. And I had heard about this course because I'd read a book by Mike Collins. Mike Collins is the Apollo 11 astronaut who orbited the moon while Neil and Buzz went down to it. He just recently passed away.
Yes, that's right.
Very, just a really incredible person, very, very thoughtful and very sharing and everything. But he wrote a great book called Carrying the Fire.
Yeah.
And I had read that, belonged to, my brother Dean says he thinks it belonged to him, but I found it at home when I was in high school. And I'd read that in high school. And that's a little bit of why I was fascinated with flight testing, because of that book. So all those things combined, and I was just really thrilled to get to head to the test pilot school. And now I was just a student again. So like I said, it was an entire year in 1990 with about 24 other officers. Some of them just engineers who just flew with us in the back seat, but about 15 were pilots, including some Marine pilot, Navy pilot, and some Japanese pilots, Italian, I think. So it's kind of an international course. And we learned to do flight testing out at Edwards Air Force Base, California. So at that point, I just wanted to be a test pilot. And fly. Test pilots usually get to fly more than one airplane, like you qualified, and maybe 2 or 3 airplanes. So, and then if anything is new, like we've had some new airplanes come online lately, the F-35, maybe you heard about the F-22 back some years ago and stuff. The test pilots are the ones who get to fly those, for the first time.
Right.
Open the envelope, as we say, take them higher on the next flight and faster on the next flight, and slower also, slower and lower. So you got to kind of expand it all out and tell the operational pilots, here's where the limits are and so forth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How risky is it to be a test pilot?
It's risky. Yeah, I did some things that, you go in on a Tuesday morning or something at 5 a.m. for a brief and find out they want you to take the plane, out to 800 knots calibrator or something. In the case of the F-16, that's even beyond ejection speeds.
Okay.
Your body would just come apart at that speed. So
wow.
there are some risky. Most people who have been test pilots look back on it and go, there was a time in my life when I was really willing to do that. But somebody does have to do it.
Right, of course.
And when you're in your 30s or so, I think you don't think about it quite as much for some reason. So I enjoyed it. I was telling a colleague last night, a fellow astronaut I went to dinner with last night, and I said, I actually had a missile shot at me for real once in flight test. He's like, really? I said, yeah, it was part of a jamming experiment, and they when they briefed it, I said, you're kidding me. This is some kind of a joke. And they said, no, the missile should track on the guy in front of you, but if it does jump to you, that's the test. We're trying to see if it will, and if it loses track on the prime target and goes to you, then you need to just turn around, just at least a 6G turn and go the other way and go fast, and it won't be able to catch you. It didn't have the warhead in it. It doesn't have the explosive part.
Right.
You still don't want to be being chased down by a big long metal rod, do you?
No.
And that was a flight test that I actually did once at Eglin Air Force Base. So it was a whole bag of things that could get you in trouble. Some of it is very boring.
Yeah.
And pretty low threat, but then there were other things that were pretty somewhat dangerous. So that was the life of a test pilot back then, and that still goes on to this day. They do lose planes in flight tests. Periodically, unfortunately.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so as a test pilot, when did you make the jump to thinking like, oh, you know what? Maybe I could become an astronaut. Maybe I should try to get involved with NASA.
Yeah, so I was at Eglin Air Force Base as a test pilot. So we had F-111 test pilots and Huey helicopter test pilots and F-4 guys, people from all backgrounds, and but all a bunch of we were all test pilot school graduates, and so pretty hard charging. I guess what they call a Type A or something like that. I don't know. Yeah. Guys who aren't afraid to try new things. And there's this one point where people were I just heard people talking at the desk. I got my application almost ready. And I'm like, what are you guys talking about? Oh, yeah, it's an application for shuttle pilot. And I go, oh, really? Yeah, Probably not. And I was probably, maybe 32 or so, 33 at the time.
Yeah.
Most of the shuttle pilots had more experience. They wanted you to have some time doing flight tests and kind of prove yourself. And not just prove yourself, but more longevity and, not screwing up or not acting up.
Yeah.
Fighter pilots can act up sometimes too. So not having a bad reputation or something. So sometimes it's good. And so I applied the first time I could. I think I probably even applied on that board.
Okay.
And then I believe I interviewed even. I was just headed to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. I was just finishing up my first flight test assignment at Eglin. And I went to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base to go back to school, to AFIT. There's the Air Force Institute of Technology in Dayton there. And I was going up there to get an advanced degree in engineering. So I made my first application, and I actually got an interview that time, and but didn't get selected.
Okay.
I think they told me, like, we interviewed 28 pilots and you were like 27. Sorry.
Okay.
Not just based on how I performed in the interview itself, but also my flying hours, summary, my currency, all these kinds of things. Just all around, there were like 26 people better than me. So,
okay.
So it wasn't really encouraging, but I applied again the next time. And I got another interview, and I didn't get selected. And then for 1998 class, I applied one more time. That was going to be my last time. And at that time, I'd gone back to Edwards Air Force Base to be an instructor at the test pilot school, the same school I'd been a student in.
Yeah.
So I was an instructor there now, and I applied and didn't even get an interview. And some of my colleagues were like, "Wow, dude, if you interviewed twice and you didn't even get an interview, it's all over."
Wow.
It is for sure. It's all over. So and then, but I was still flying 2 years later. I was 40 already, which was kind of beyond the age that they normally are looking at. They're looking for between like 35 and 38, so somehow or other. But I was flying the F-15 and F-16. At the same time, instructing students, and the students had given me an award for outstanding flight instructor. One of the classes had given me that award. So hey, you know what? I'm just gonna apply one more time.
Yeah.
And I applied for that 2000 class, and that's the one I finally got selected for. And they said, "You wanna?" I remember they actually called us on July 20th, 2000, because that was the anniversary of the Apollo landing. So people classmates reminded each other of that. They called and said, "Hey, if you still want to work at NASA, you can come start training as a space shuttle pilot." I said, "On my way."
Yeah. I mean, what was going through your head on that call?
Yeah, I mean, it was unbelievable. I still remember exactly where I was sitting and almost what was on my desk and everything when I got that call. When you get rejected, you also get a call. Okay. It's just from a different person.
Right.
So, and that person is the person who kind of does the administration for the selection. So there's a guy named Dwayne Ross back then.
Okay.
Lovely guy. He's one of the family now. He's the one who runs the selection office, and he would call and say, "You know what? We really liked you and everything, but as you know, there's a really lot of good candidates, and we can only take so many this time. So we want to encourage you to apply again." Of course, they'll tell you that same thing forever. But this time it was like, "Can you hold for the director?" I was like, "Sure."
Yeah.
Said, so that was pretty special call, and then of course some other folks in the schoolhouse that applied, kind of walking around looking at each other. They tell you you're not allowed to tell anybody until they release it, right? You can tell your family, but you're not allowed to tell anybody else. And so there was another guy, Barry Wilmore, who was a Navy pilot, but he worked for the Air Force Test Pilot School.
Okay.
The services try to do this, this exchange, because you get some insight from other services.
Oh, sure.
So, this guy flew the F-18 or he flew the F-14. He can teach us some things that we should maybe think about for our F-15s and F-16s, right, in the Air Force too. So we had a lot of exchange, and he walked by and he goes, "Hear anything from NASA this morning?" I go, "Did you?"
Yeah.
And we could just tell by the way the other one was looking at us. I was like, he put the little thumbs up, and I go, "Oh man, congratulations!" So I guess the test pilot school is going to have to find two guys to replace us here pretty quickly.
Yeah,
so
that's cool.
But and then that was July 20th, and then middle of August we were at NASA already. So they gave us very, very little time. And normally your losing job would be that would be very nice to them, but they appreciated it. It was for a very special thing. And so the Air Force said, okay, we'll let you go.
Yeah.
Go to NASA. So.
What was your family's reaction to that?
Oh, they were, it's mixed in some way. That my kids, for example, really love to be out there in the Antelope Valley in Lancaster, California.
Yeah.
They had a great school situation, a very small school, where they had a lot of participation. And then it's just, it's one more move. Okay, we're going to Houston, in the middle of our high school years. Very different than my experience in high school, right? Where I graduated with the kids in my kindergarten yearbook picture, right? Same kids. So it's a little bittersweet. There's the goods about it and bad about it, but they were happy for me.
Yeah.
So
okay.
They realized that's something that I had been shooting for and proud of and everything. But I don't think they ever fell in love with Houston the way they did with a few of the other places in their life. But they were late in their high school careers. So
yeah. Okay. Now, when you initially became involved with NASA, did you have any kind of goals in mind about what you'd want to do at NASA, or were you just happy to be there, kind of?
Just happy to be there.
Yeah.
Just hang on to anybody else's shirt tails I can.
Yeah.
Try not to wash out.
Yeah.
They don't make you astronauts right away. You're called an astronaut candidate when you arrive.
Okay.
Before you arrive and before you're selected, you're an astronaut hopeful.
Right.
They call us ASCANs when we're astronaut candidates. I won't tell you what they call us when you're an astronaut hopeful.
Okay.
But because it sounds a little wrong.
Okay.
But then, so for 1 year after you arrive, you just first of all you get all the welcomes and everything, and re-medical and everything like that, and introduce yourself to the press. And then when you go back in hiding, it used to be that. You had a little exposure to the press at the beginning, and then we were off limits to the press. Because they didn't really trust us to say anything right yet. We didn't know anything about the program anyway, and we had other things to focus on.
Right.
So we got some tours of all the other centers. We went and visited them at the center directors and so forth, tried to learn a little bit about NASA. And then we just started heading into a classroom, and today we're talking about the reaction control system vernier jets, on the space shuttle.
Yeah.
And at the end of the week, there will be a test. So we just started having classes and simulators and what they call single system trainers, where you just focus on like one system, maybe the electrical DC system or the S-band communication system. And just learning about the space shuttle. That's where we started. So, and they also started us in Russian language training.
Okay. Because
at the time we arrived, we still had before us the space station construction all to go, and then space station operations, which continues to this day. So we started taking Russian language training too. Yeah. So, and then you get courses just in physical sciences and orbital mechanics and something like that to accompany it. But it's just astronaut school for 1 year as an astronaut candidate, and then at the end of that we get some silver astronaut pins, and we're not flown astronauts, and you always have to say, well, I'm an unflown astronaut, like you're still one. Right. And but then you can go out and start doing the work of the agency, working in mission control maybe, doing a capsule communicator where you're talking to the crew and back and forth to the flight director and then to the crew on board and stuff. You're kind of an intermediary, if you will. So they might say, oh, hey, we need this system taken to the opposite position. And you would say, hey, go over there on R2 and flip the left helium pressure, switch up. Okay. You're kind of the translator for what the crew needed to know versus what the flight controllers needed done in many ways. But so you just do some technical jobs and of various kinds and. Support. You continue to train. We flew the T-38 aircraft again as a trainer a lot of the astronauts who weren't pilots became, backseaters and learned to talk on the radios and do all the navigation, and many of them could fly the airplane. After a few years, they could fly that T-38 by themselves they could do everything they needed to do themselves from the back seat. We were always in the aircraft with them, but
yeah.
So, and that having something like that as part of your training, when you're flying an aircraft, there's something that you need to be doing next. There's always the next thing. So one time, an instructor said, "Kevin, what's the two most important things in aviation?" I thought a while and probably came up with a couple of wrong answers. And he goes, "No, it's just the next two things. Whatever the next two things you have to do are, those are the most important." And that's kind of what flying the high-performance aircraft did for us. But yeah, so it just got us ready for space flight. Rarely did anybody get assigned to a space flight in the history of the program prior to about 3 years. So a few did, but it was usually 3 years before you could get assigned. So I might have flown as early as 2004, say, or 2005 if you were the very first in your class. In my case, I ended up being all the way till 2009 because of the accident. But
sure.
But it's all still good. So
yeah, okay. And let's see, when you're an astronaut candidate, how competitive is that process to actually become an astronaut?
It's mostly cooperative, not so competitive.
Okay.
But we recognize that during that program, you would go to a sim, let's say a 4-hour sim in the space shuttle, and they would throw problems at you, and there was always a senior astronaut in there. And so you realize that, how I perform versus how the others can matter whether I get assigned to this flight in 2007 or that flight in 2008. It could matter. So there was a little bit of a competitive spirit, I suppose, but it didn't ever cause any kind of trouble or anything for anybody in my class. We all flew in space. In fact, one of my classmates is in space again right now.
Oh, wow, okay.
Megan MacArthur. She was the youngest in the class.
Yeah. Wow.
So she's still young enough to be doing it. And she took a flight also in 2009 and then didn't fly again until 2021.
Yeah.
But she took some management positions and so forth like that. So space flight is only a small part kind of our career. Most of the time is spent in simulators or supporting or working mission control, so forth. So
yeah, okay. And let's see, did you have to go when you first became an astronaut? Did you have to go through a certain amount of like physical training at all, or?
Yeah, we did. We had a bit of a boot camp to teach us how to work out.
Okay.
That lasted a couple weeks.
Yeah.
And then we routinely, as astronaut candidates, we met at the gym.
Okay.
Say at 6:30 in the morning, most days of the week, and we would jog over to a building and run up and down the stairs or something like that. And we actually have paid staff to help us train.
Yeah.
Sure. And so forth. So that's good. And they really step it up. When you're getting ready to fly in space, especially a long duration flight, if you're going to go for 6 months, let's say, some people a year has happened. They really want to make sure you leave in the best condition you can. So not hurting you, first of all, teaching you how to exercise in space, and also making sure you're in good condition so that it doesn't take too much toll on you before you come home.
Yeah. Are there any like sort of simulations that you kind of get put into for physical training at all to, I guess, prepare your body for being in space, or?
Not. Like I said, they teach us how to use the space-based exercise equipment.
Okay.
There's a treadmill that you have to use. If you're going to run on a treadmill in space, you somehow got to force your body against it, right? So we do that with a harness and bungee cords, essentially.
Okay.
So you train on how you're going to use all that, those things.
Yeah.
We do some centrifuge training, so that you can get some experience with G-forces.
Okay.
Before the shuttle flight, example, you go to Kelly Air Force Base in Texas, and they put you in a suit like you'll fly, the launch and entry suit, and then they actually took us through the launch profile a couple times, so you could feel how the G's build and how they relax and how they build again and so forth, and how long it is, just kind of what that 9 minutes is going to feel like. Did the same thing in Star City, Russia for the Soyuz flight. Now, Soyuz entry can be a lot more extreme.
Mm-hmm.
It can be 8 or 9 Gs if it's what they call a down-moded ballistic entry.
Okay.
So we did the training to those G levels and everything, with the body orientation that we'd have and in the suit and stuff we'd be wearing. So we did that. And then they were a little bit, the Russian program was a little bit more intent on making sure your vestibular system is kind of ready to go. So there was a spinning chair, and then they used to do a tilt table for us, where we'd lie on a kind of a horizontal table, kind of strap onto it, and then they would progressively tip it further to on your head. So it kind of pushed the body fluids to your head and out of your feet, which is really what happens to you the instant you're in space. You have zero gravity. You don't have the gravity pulling the blood and the fluids to your legs and feet and out of your head, and it's heart it's trying to push too hard into your head, so you get kind of a puffy head and so forth. So that preparation, that physiological preparation helps you adapt. Yeah, sure. A little bit when you get there, but NASA didn't really do those things.
Okay. So, interesting.
As much. It is interesting, and I can't really tell you why. It just wasn't part of the program.
Different sort of philosophies for training or something,
Yeah, it is. Uh-huh.
So let's see, what was your initial reaction when you learned, okay, you're going to be on a space flight?
Let's see, I was most interested in who's my commander going to be at that point, and who are my crewmates.
Yeah.
And, and what are we doing? What are we taking up there and bringing home?
Yeah.
So that's kind of, and they usually it's the night before, 9:30 at night, and the chief of the astronaut office calls you at home and says, "Hey, I'm going to assign STS-128 tomorrow, and you're going to be the pilot. So be sure you're at the all hands in the meeting, and I'm going to announce your crew." And I did say, "Well, who's my commander?" The commander's going to be, it's Turkel. So the rest of you will find out tomorrow. So then you just have a pilot meeting, and everybody's in there, sitting everywhere. The crew doesn't know who the other ones are yet, really. So we sit together. And then he just says, "Okay, Senior Turkel's got a crew announced. Senior Turkel's going to be the commander of STS-28, and this pilot's going to be Kevin Ford." And then everybody claps a little bit. And MS-1's going to be Pat Forrester, and 2's going to be Jose Hernandez. And so it's kind of the way you get assigned, and everybody congratulates you, and they kind of go, "Oh, congratulations," and they go, too bad it's not me, right? So I remember even after I was assigned to fly on STS-128, the subsequent ones, the 29 and the 30, I'm like, "Oh man, they're another flight assignment. I'm not on it, but you already got one. Just be happy."
Yeah.
So, but we were happy. There was a lot of flying back then in the shuttle days. We had 6 or 7 crew members on a flight. So, in theory, once you'd flown a flight, your number could come back around pretty fast after you were landed and debriefed and ready to go again. So everybody was always hoping for a flight assignment. And there's no better job, really, than to be assigned to a flight, because now you only do things related to preparing to your flight. You don't have to July 4th, you don't have to go to Disney World and ride in the parade, just because they asked for an astronaut. So if their congressman or whatever wanted an astronaut for a particular event, NASA would send one. But once you were assigned, you didn't have to answer to that thing anymore. You were like, you had Memorial Weekend. Now, there's one particular event. Every Memorial Weekend, they had to send some astronaut every year, and we were all like, "Who's getting that this year?"
Oh my gosh! Yeah, different priorities, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. So once you're assigned, though, you were just working your flight, and every training event you did was focused on your numbers, right?
Yeah.
You're gonna launch to 51.6 degree inclination to space station. You're gonna have this center of gravity in your vehicle, and so all those numbers and all those calculations and stuff, you start flying them like you'll really fly them, and that's a lot of fun. So.
Sure. Okay, that's cool.
Mm-hmm.
And so, what was the goal of your mission when you the first time you went up?
Yeah, it was one of the station construction missions.
Okay.
I had a different number for the ISS program, called it 17A. They had their own patch, the 17th American Assembly Mission. We're getting ready to fly. They're still using these numbers. We're getting ready to fly. The Russians are going to launch a whole new module to space station in just a few weeks. Probably, I think it's going to launch on the 21st now.
Okay.
It's a research module, and it's called 3R. It's the third Russian construction mission.
Yeah.
So their first two, so they're only on their third, but they put their pieces up there in kind of a different way than we do. So we had all these assembly flights, they were called. So we took up, we actually took up a module that we also brought home with us, but inside it was 15,000 pounds of stuff.
Okay.
Including the treadmill, filters, some kind of various big boxes and tanks and so forth. So a lot of equipment went up with us on that flight. And besides that module, it was called Leonardo. It was we just took it out of the payload bay of the space shuttle, and we hooked it onto the bottom of the space station, opened the hatches between it and the station, and brought all this cargo in. But there were also a few other things that were in the payload bay of the space shuttle to a European thing that went on the outside of the space station.
Yeah.
And a big ammonia tank. An ammonia tank is about the size of two refrigerators stacked next to each other and weighs almost like 2,000 pounds.
Okay.
And so that was back in the payload bay too. And so while we were there, we had 3 spacewalks where we took all those things out of the payload bay and attached them to the outside of the space station, hooked up the hoses and electrics and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Too, while we were there. So it was a grab bag of things that were related to space station assembly.
Okay.
So
interesting.
One of my little technical claims to fame. Nobody's interested in this except kind of sometimes other astronauts. Is that I flew this big Canadian arm.
Mm-hmm.
It's about 50 feet long. It's got like 7 joints on it with a Swedish astronaut, Christer Fuglesang, riding on it, and he held this tank in his hands just by 2 little handrails, like maybe a handrail you'd have to pull your car door closed.
Yeah.
And in his hands was 2,000 pounds. So it's the weight of a full-size car.
Yeah.
He just held it in his hands.
Yeah.
And then the other astronaut released it from the space shuttle payload bay. And then I maneuvered this arm through, maybe 100 feet of open space to the back truss of the space station.
Yeah.
And he just held this thing in his hands. He
Wow.
carried it along with him, and then over there we hooked it onto the space station.
Wow.
So that was the biggest and most massive handheld object anybody's ever had to just handle in space. And he held it, but I take some credit for not moving the arm too quickly.
Yeah.
Because it's got a lot of mass. So.
Wow. That's interesting. I mean,
yeah.
Things that I think most people can never imagine, like the situation, because it's so out of this world, literally. That's cool.
Yeah. So if you took your Jeep Grand Cherokee by the bumper, and then just started pulling it around, and it's 0 gravity, but the mass is still massive.
Oh, sure.
So if you try to start it and stop it quickly, it's really hard to do.
Yeah.
So it was a tricky operation. So, but
wow.
One of those things only a few of us know.
Yeah, that's cool.
Uh-huh.
So I guess just trying to get some insight in terms of your perspective right before that mission. What were you thinking when you went to the spaceship and you're basically preparing yourself for liftoff? What's going through your head?
Don't mess anything up.
Yeah. Probably good.
the pilot. So I was the pilot on this flight. That sounds like the boss, but it's really not. The commander is the boss.
Yeah.
And so Sturcow had flown already 2 times as a pilot in the right seat, and then he'd flown already 1 time in the left seat as the commander. This was his 4th flight. But the pilot is pretty busy. We start up the APUs. We take them to a high pressure. We reconfigure some of the software and stuff and reset some systems right before liftoff. And it all has to be done kind of in a timely manner. And if you mess something up, you can find that your launch scrubbed.
Okay.
So because of you, right?
Yeah.
That's not what you want to happen. There's a million people out there to watch the launch.
Yeah.
They all go home and read the newspaper. Why did they scrub? Well, because Kevin Ford, took the switch to low when he should have took it to high. So.
Okay.
So you just kind of, you're focused on all the things you learned and doing it all right and everything. And of course, there is an appreciation for what you're about to do, climbing on top of the vehicle, especially when you're actually going out for the real launch and it's all ready to go and fueled up and everything, and the oxygen is hissing out of the side of it, and all the lights are on it. There's nobody there.
Yeah.
One of the really weird things when you walk to the launch pad, every time you ever go to the launch pad, there's 200 people working out there. There's just cars parked there. There's people everywhere. There's a gate guard. And
Yeah.
You people leaving and coming in in coat and ties and work clothes, and then you go for launch, and you're like, there's nobody within 5 miles of this thing.
Yeah. Wow.
Just the astronauts and like 2 people, So it's just really, it's really weird. So, but you're really kind of. I didn't feel nervous. I really didn't. Maybe there's a few times where you think, wow, this is maybe really the night. So,
yeah.
But I did feel like really hyper aware and everything.
Oh, sure.
And really, really ready to go do it, and just enjoying the moment. And, hoping we didn't scrub, from some technical thing or other. We did scrub our first launch on the first try, somewhere around the 24th of August.
Okay.
And we counted all the way down to the 15-minute point. So everything was looking great with the systems. And the guy sitting behind me, Pat Forrester, he said, "Hey, I think I saw lightning out there." And I did too, but I'm like, "Nah, Pat, that was just a bug flying through the xenon lights. That was a lightning." And then some water started hitting the window. He goes, "Oh, here comes the rain." I go, "No, Pat, that's just condensation,
Yeah.
from the cold cryo tags hitting our window with the winds, and all of a sudden it just poured down." And said, "Hey, we're gonna scrub tonight." So we unfortunately, when you scrub, you have to save the system, the solid rocket boosters and all that stuff. So it's a safe system.
Yeah.
And then it's a good hour before they come get you out again. And you're lying on your back. Just like if you took a chair and you laid it on its back on the floor, and you're just sitting there looking skyward, right?
Yeah.
Straight up. So it's not the most comfortable place to be.
I bet.
It took a whole other hour. And then we'd get back to the sleeping quarters. We call it the crew quarters at like 4 a.m. and had dinner and stuff, and nobody was really happy to see us because they really wanted us to be in space, and so they could all go home, right?
Right.
So we didn't want to scrub on the real night and everything. So when you get to 0 and it cuts loose, it's really a really, really great feeling, and I just felt nothing but really excited about it. And, wow, this thing's really shaking.
Yeah.
Wow, it really got bright outside with the solid rocket boosters lit. It was midnight, and it just lit up like daylight outside.
Yeah.
And then you start going, I hope my chair doesn't break. Because you're shaking so much with the solid rocket boosters that you just feel like you're really testing this aluminum seat. It's not like it's laying on the floor. It's like it's sticking out of the wall. It's like if you took a chair and you glued the feet to the wall up in the middle of the wall somewhere, and so it's really flexing, and so it's all just about like concern. And then when you get to space and it all worked, you're like, I can't believe that really works. I can't believe we just did that in this machine. So, whoever built this thing and designed it, they're the people.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Sure. Yeah. That's pretty wild. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
So when you first reached outer space, what was going through your head then at that point?
So so there's things for me to do as the pilot. So it was like main engine cutoff.
Yeah.
I checked the feet per second. How fast did we end up going? Because if you're 100 miles an hour too slow,
yeah,
you have to do some things to make sure you can stay in orbit. If you're a couple hundred miles too slow, you're going to Spain.
Okay.
It's really critical. So you
Yeah.
go all the way to 17,500 miles an hour, but if you go like 17,300, you can't even stay in space.
Oh wow. Okay.
Because you don't have the energy to do it. The orbit you're making is coming back down to the atmosphere.
Okay.
So there's a bunch of checks you do, and then I have to close the doors where the fuel came from that big orange tank. It comes into the space shuttle.
Yeah.
And these big 17-inch feed lines. And it goes back to the engines, and I have to close those doors because they're vulnerable. If we got to re-enter, you have to have the thermal protection on those doors. So I'm closing those doors, and I got to make sure I do that right. So actually, as the pilot, right after the main engine cutoff, you're kind of busy for a few minutes doing your work.
Sure.
And then there's a little time you get everything running. Maybe you shut down or take the APUs to low or something so they're not using so much fuel, and then you look out and you're like, wow, there's the full moon and everything's floating around me,
Yeah.
People have gotten their drink bags out. There's little droplets of water, and there was a little, I opened my helmet visor, and I was, the droplets of water, I can't remember if I made them or somebody else did, but I was just kind of grabbing them and putting them in my mouth, just so they didn't land on instrument panels and stuff. And one of the things I shoved in was a little screw, just a little flathead screw that was just floating up in my front of my face.
Yeah.
So I put it in my mouth thinking it was a little drop of water, and I realized it was a screw, and I pulled it back out, and I handed it to my MS1 behind me, Pat Forrester, and said, hey, take this, put it on a piece of gray tape or something like that.
Oh my God.
We don't lose it again. But it was just, it was something that got stuck somewhere since the last shuttle flight and was just floating around in there. And we were in the dark still, but then within about 15 minutes, we flew toward Europe and into the sunrise.
Yeah.
And it was, you can't even kind of begin to describe it. It's the way the Earth looks from space it's like you see in the pictures, but it's lit up. It's like shining into your eyes. It's not just a reflection of something ink on paper.
Yeah.
It's really glowing, and it's you can see the three-dimensional nature of it and the atmosphere and the sun moving and everything. And you're just like, okay, the Earth isn't flat.
Yeah, that's right.
It's round, and it's really gorgeous to see it, and it looks remarkably small.
Yeah.
Kind of at that point. So.
Yeah, that's
we're in Europe, in like 15 or 20 minutes. So the engines quit just east of Massachusetts, but you have the speed to stay in orbit, and so at that speed, you cross the Atlantic quickly, and we have to do another adjustment burn to add a little bit of speed about halfway around the planet. So you kind of get ready for that job. It's called the OMS-2, Orbital Maneuvering System 2 burn. And I think we did it just about over Saudi Arabia somewhere or something like that.
Okay.
And then that makes sure that as you go back around over Florida, you're not too low into the atmosphere and stuff. So it brings your orbit up higher so that you're on the orbit you need to stay in orbit without the air catching you, and at the right altitude to phase to catch up with the target, which was the International Space Station. So
yeah. Okay.
But it's busy. I mean, you really have real work to do and all this sort of thing. So there's not a lot of time for just like being a tourist.
Yeah, enjoying the view, or
yeah.
Yeah, sure. So basically, you're during the space flight, before you get into space, you're going around the planet to a certain extent before you finally leave the atmosphere and go off.
Yeah, so you kind of go straight. We go pretty vertically off the pad.
Yeah.
And there's two objectives. One is to get above the dense atmosphere. So the rule is about 80 miles high.
Okay.
Once you're above about 80 miles high, then you wouldn't really feel any wind if you stuck your hand out the window.
Okay.
If you're at 75 miles high and you're going 5 miles per second.
Yeah.
Right. So you're moving pretty fast. But if you stuck your hand out the window, you would feel a breeze. This is like somebody was blowing on your hand.
Yeah.
Not a strong one, not like you'd feel at sea level.
Sure.
But it's enough to slow you down and pull you down.
Yeah.
Back to Earth. So if you're below 80 miles, you're going to come home in less than a day. You will go back to Earth in less than a day.
Yeah.
So you got to be above a certain altitude to stay there, and then not too high, because the lower you go, actually, the faster you catch up with the space station.
Yeah. So, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. It's an orbital mechanics course that you'd have to have in miniature, but the lower you go, the actual faster you go.
Right.
So it's kind of like when you're swinging a string and you pull the string in tighter to your hand, it goes faster and faster and faster. So
yeah, okay, sure.
Yeah, as you go up higher, you go slower.
Yeah, that's interesting. Okay.
So it's all calculus that's done by the masters in mission control to figure out the precise liftoff time.
Yeah.
Exactly what altitude we should fly at to catch up and phase to the International Space Station at the right pace. And there's also some factors in there nobody would imagine, that is your orbital plane changes a little bit. It changes faster the lower you are.
Yeah.
So that all has to be taken into account too for launch time and all this kinds of things, so that you can indeed end up joining with the International Space Station with the amount of fuel you have in 2 days.
Yeah. Okay.
It's quite complicated. Fortunately, the pilot and commander don't have to figure all that stuff out. We just fly the burns that they tell us to fly. But there's a lot of manual switch throws and enabling that goes on, and monitoring that goes on for pressures and temperatures and everything, and down modes. So if we had some kind of a failure, we could go ahead and complete the burn with an alternate system ourselves.
Yeah.
So to try to make sure that we stay on track even with system problems.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And was it easy to adjust to life in space? Did your training prepare you pretty well for that, or?
Yeah. There's a lot of we get all these detailed instructions about where you can find your toothbrush, even
Yeah.
and medicines if you need them. Most people it takes some getting used to. Even if you're a fighter pilot, you move your head a lot as a fighter pilot, and you get used to that. But you're not really used to the vestibular system being at zero gravity and not knowing where up is and all this kind of stuff. So it can kind of mess with your head and your body a little bit. So most people take a little bit of medication just as a kind of a prophylactic, just in case they get sick, because you still got to get your work done and everything.
Oh yeah.
And you really feel a bit like you're hanging upside down all the time. So when you think of zero, you kind of think, well, I'm just floating. But the truth is, it takes you to the point where if you're in your seat and you have your seatbelt on, you feel like you're hanging upside down.
Yeah.
You're not. And if you turn upside down, you still feel like you're hanging upside down. It's just that your head is not used to that prolonged zero-G exposure. We do get we get some training in airplanes where we can do that for about 20 seconds.
Okay.
But 20 seconds isn't very long. After you've been up there a few hours, you start to realize that, like, okay, I'm going to feel like I'm hanging upside down. I better just forget about it, right?
Yeah.
Just move on. There's nothing you can change. So it messes with your head just a little bit, and also the visuals out the window can kind of mess with you a little bit when what you're feeling doesn't jive exactly with what you're seeing. If you look out in the like say the space shuttle is traveling backwards or something and upside down.
Yeah.
You're as a pilot, your brain isn't really used to seeing something like that, so it can make you a little bit nauseated, to be honest, just to look out there and see that.
Yeah. So I mean, so what you're describing is basically like when you're in space, it kind of feels like you're just upside down the whole time, or
when you first get there, it just feels like somebody turned because you've had gravity on you the whole time.
Yeah.
Your whole life.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, you're hanging upside down. Your neck muscles don't have to do anything at all.
Yeah.
So I don't know, for some reason, to me, and I've had a few other people tell me the same thing, that they felt like really they were hanging upside down.
Yeah.
Right after they got to space.
And
from a sensory and nervous system kind of point of view. Mm-hmm.
And how long did it take for you to adjust?
That pretty much went away the next day.
Okay. That's good.
So you do still get a little bit of like stuffiness. Your sinuses, the fluids kind of go to your head.
Yeah.
And so you get a little bit of a puffy face, and you get a little congested and stuff like that. That you can, you just can kind of deal with. But the confusion of feeling upside down only lasts really till the second day, I think.
That's good.
Yeah.
What was your first spacewalk like?
I didn't actually do a spacewalk outside. So on the space shuttle, pilots never did a spacewalk.
Okay, got it.
There's a couple reasons for it. One of them is that you train a lot more for the ascent than the entry.
Okay.
Including flying aircraft type simulators. We had a Gulfstream that's simulated. So the pilot and commander are busy really training and working out trajectories and stuff like that in terms of the flying, practicing for emergencies and stuff like that, at the same time that the other guys are practicing for their spacewalks.
Okay.
Underneath the water all day long out at the neutral buoyancy lab, we call it. So it kind of separates the training requirements, for one thing. And the other thing is, spacewalking is actually pretty dangerous. So when you're in space, the two guys that go outside, there's no 911, there's no fire truck with the big long ladder.
Right.
There's lots of cables, sharp objects. There's always the chance of coming, untethered, micrometeorites, system failures in their suits. Yeah, which are very complicated. That could cause one of them to be lost. Now we have never lost one doing it, right? But that's only because we take it very seriously. Yeah, sure. I mean, very seriously. So there's no messing around when it comes to spacewalk. So anyway, they didn't really want to lose a pilot or commander because really you need them both to come home too. It puts everybody else at risk if you lose one of those guys. Yeah. I'm not saying any astronaut's expendable, but if you don't have a guy down on the mid deck, you're stuck. That doesn't matter too much. If you don't have a pilot or commander, you have a lot more challenges coming home. Yeah. There were a couple who trained to back up crews in a few instances where the pilots trained as the second guy in case there was a health problem or something in space. Okay. And a guy couldn't go out and do a spacewalk. But never did we actually send a pilot out on a mission where he was the pilot or commander. Got it. Okay. That didn't happen on shuttle. On space station, I was supposed to do a spacewalk for some equipment, and even when I launched, I was going to do a spacewalk, but the equipment didn't make it up there because of some cargo spaceship issues. Oh, okay. So we didn't get it in time for me to do that spacewalk, unfortunately. And of course, I would have loved to have done that. Yeah. It was just a disappointment, but the right attitude is to go, you know what, really lucky to be in space looking out a window. Yeah, true. Yes. It's too bad. There was always, even when I found out it was going to be canceled, I was already in space when I found out it would be canceled, and I thought, yeah, maybe there'll be something will break outside, and I'll still get to go out. I didn't hope for that, but
Right.
I thought, but
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
then what I got within the last 4 or 5 days, I was like, well, that's not going to happen. And then when I got home, I had to say, do I want to go back one more time just to get a spacewalk? And I was getting a little long in the tooth, as we say, so I didn't end up trying to go back one more time.
Yeah.
But I would love to have done it. I trained an awful lot for it. It's some of the most grueling training, but very interesting. So we go spend a whole day at the neutral buoyancy lab, and I mean, like, hey, you arrive at 6:20 in the morning, and you're still there at 5:00 at night, and you're in underwater for about 6.5 hours.
Wow.
So in the spacesuit itself, probably 7, with the visor down, and it's hard work moving that suit around under pressure. And,
oh, sure.
You only have a small amount of water to drink while you're training. I think 750 milliliters, so like 3/4 of a quart of water or something.
Yeah.
The last chill day, no food in there. So the training, I probably did that 40 times for a whole day. To do that spacewalk, and then I didn't get to do the spacewalk. So it wasn't just the disappointment of, I don't get to go out there and look between my feet and see Earth.
Right.
But I also did all that.
Yeah, all the work for it. Yeah.
All that work for it, and I didn't get to do it. But I did, as soon as I got there on my long flight, I suited up Sonny Williams and Akio Side to go outside. There's a person who there's the 400-step checklist.
Mm-hmm.
So they get them all suited up and out the door into space. And so I did get to watch them do a spacewalk, and at that point thinking, my turn is coming.
Yeah.
But it didn't happen that way, and that's life.
Okay,
so,
sure.
Yeah.
All right. And what are the interactions like between the different astronauts in space?
Just almost, what you'd expect. We see each other all the time, every day.
Yeah.
So there are times when you get in each other's way.
Okay.
Or you use somebody's toothpaste and you thought it was yours, or their toothbrush maybe. People need help.
Yeah.
Occasionally, hey, dude, I lost my glasses. Can you come help me look for them? And on Earth, if you lose your glasses, you look on the floor.
Right.
Or you look beside you on the couch. In space, they could have gone 6 different directions. They could have gone up, down, left, right, in and out, forward and back. And so sometimes you need help. And just some tasks are harder. Not every bolt fits in every hole like it's supposed to. And so there's a lot of teamwork and everything up there. And sometimes people are in hurries and leave messes, or maybe there's a place where we keep all the tape, the Kapton tape and the gray tape, and the medical tape, and then you go and you just like, okay, tape's not there. Who's got the tape? So and some days you might have a little headache or something, or feel bad. We have the carbon dioxide on space station is about 10 times what it is sitting where you are right now.
Yeah.
So about 10 times. So people occasionally get little headaches and don't feel good for the day. So sometimes people get a little grumpy, and need a little extra space or a little extra help. And if I felt like somebody was grumpy, I would make their favorite dinner for them or something, put it on early so we could have an early dinner. And everybody's just trying to help each other out. Astronauts are pretty carefully chosen to be people who aren't annoying.
Okay.
If you've been discovered to be annoying, you're probably not going to get assigned a 6-month space station flight.
Yeah.
So if you're not the helpful kind of person, we call it the expeditionary behavior.
Yeah.
If you can't go the extra mile, always keep the paper on the printer full. Don't take the last one out and just go away.
Right.
Even when mission control's asking you do something ridiculous, being diplomatic and nice about it.
Yeah.
Recognizing everybody's got a common goal and trying to get the job done.
Yeah.
So kind of normal people behavior. There's lots of lots of kind of unusual things, the way you might be exercising on the machine, and 5 minutes later have to talk to the governor of Indiana or something on video.
Yeah.
It's just the way it is.
Yeah.
So, there's a lot of kind of time demands. I would say one of the hardest things for me in space, and something I still dream about almost to this day, was the very rigorous schedule. When you got up in the morning, you would look at a computer screen, OSTPV it was called, an onboard system training. I forget the acronym, but it was a red line that showed what time it was right now, and then it had little boxes all the way across from the left to the right, and it showed what you were going to be doing every minute today, and trying to stay on that clock and that timeline.
Yeah.
Even in the face of, at some point I gotta go to the restroom, and today when I go to the restroom, I can't just go and be back in 5 minutes. I have to put it into a bag, and then I have to take samples out of the bag, and I have to put them in the freezer, and I have to write numbers on them and report it to mission control, and then I can go back to my job again. So,
oh, wow.
How long do I want to wait to pee when you know it's going to take you half an hour to go do that?
Yeah.
So there were a lot of medical things, and people, hey, I got to do this, but I need help. I can't find this, and so there was a lot of little bit of stress up there.
Yeah.
But the payoff in terms of cool factor, waking up and floating in zero G and looking out the windows at the earth below you were worth it.
Oh, sure. Yeah, that's pretty awesome.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it sounds like there's potential for a lot of kind of interesting things to happen, interesting interactions. Do you have any funny or memorable stories about being in space?
Oh, let's see if I can think of anything that comes to mind. I mean, lots of interesting. I was up there for 5 weeks. I stayed by myself, and what I mean by that is I was with the crew of 2 cosmonauts.
Okay.
Myself on a single Soyuz that went up. So Oleg Novitsky, Yevgeny Tarelkin, and myself. We launched, and the other crew left after about 2.5 weeks.
Okay.
And until from November to almost Christmas time, I was there as the only American.
Yeah.
And the cosmonauts worked in the Russian segment mostly, not even anywhere where they could hear me scream, if I needed help.
Yeah.
And so it was if I had to go to the bathroom and Houston called. They didn't even answer because they knew it was Houston, not Moscow calling.
Yeah.
Right? So you have to kind of you're responsible for everything. And there was a time when, for example, I lost a filter cover, and like I said, it can go one of 6 directions.
Yeah.
And it could have gone up above, over into Node 3, over into the airlock, toward the lab, down toward the logistics module, and I had no idea where it was. So it was a one-of-a-kind piece of equipment.
Yeah.
And most of the time I would call all hands on deck, right, and have everybody look around for it, but they wouldn't have known what it looked like anyway, and I could hear them talking to Moscow. So somebody had told me, hey, get a similar item. So I went and got a piece of computer paper off the printer, and they said, just be real still and let go again and see where it goes. And so it took maybe 10 minutes or so, and it kind of went up and made a turn, went over into the airlock, went above the spacesuit in the airlock, and down behind the spacesuit's shoulder, and followed it there, and there was my little filter.
Wow.
that I lost. So kind of a space trick to find things. But there were other times too when I just if you lost something like that, you just have to say, hey, Houston, I'm going to have to pause this task because I can't find this particular these needles that were supposed to. You don't necessarily have to admit right then that you lost them. Oh, really? Because they should be right there in that bag marked 1023. And you're like, well, they were earlier, but they're not there anymore.
Oh my gosh.
Oh yeah. So The people interactions, not too many real surprises. You just have to kind of make sure you're treading lightly and doing what you can to help people out.
Sure.
Realize you're kind of, don't throw anything away, even if you think it looks like trash. You should ask the other people first.
Yeah. So how many different missions in space have you been on?
Just two. So
Just two,
I went
okay.
on this shuttle in 2009. That was a 2-week flight.
Yeah.
STS-128. It was on Space Shuttle Discovery, and then I flew again in 2012. Launched in October.
Yeah.
2012, and landed in March of 2013, and that was flown on a Soyuz out of Kazakhstan, and that was after we retired the space shuttle.
Yeah. Okay.
So I really fancied just being a space shuttle pilot forever.
Yeah. Sure.
I just wanted to stay. I enjoyed the training for that. I enjoyed the science of it and everything, and just that operation. But then they, because of that Columbia accident, there was a decision made to retire them in 2011.
Okay.
So I had, if they'd flown another flight or two, I might have gotten one more shuttle flight. If I had done 2 shuttle flights, I probably wouldn't have done the long flight with Soyuz. I probably would have just declared, I'm professionally satisfied, and we'll just go on to a different career or management or something like that. Because of my age, I was in my 50s.
Sure.
By then. But because I didn't get another shuttle flight, I decided to take the opportunity and just go ahead and do the expedition. So it wasn't just kind of a matter of, hey, okay, I'll do an expedition. The management had to say it was okay. It was a little bit of a different business. Like I had never done as a pilot, I had never done any spacewalk training.
Yeah.
So I had done a familiarization run or two, but not bona fide training and qualification in spacewalking. So I knew if I took the expedition, that was in front of me. And I knew I had to learn Russian a lot better than I had to as a shuttle pilot. In fact, as soon as I said, okay, I'll do it, they said, great. 5 weeks from now, you're going to be living in Moscow with a family for 5 weeks. So I go, really? Okay.
That's funny.
Got to start planning my life around that, because they put you in this immersion program that's designed to bring you up a couple levels with your Russian abilities. So, and it was important because when I flew Soyuz, then we do everything in Russian. They're talking when I strap myself into the Soyuz. I got to check in with this Russian mission control and say, hey, this is Kevin. I'm on board. My straps are good. My oxygen pressure reads this, and my visor's open, and all this. You have to do it all in Russian, and they give you some numbers that you're supposed to look at, and you have to be able to understand them. And so, and all the checklist, the whole business, all the labels, all the switches in the cockpit, plus the pages and pages of checklist items is all not only Russian but Russian acronyms. Or short versions. So so you have to get pretty decent at the Russian. So I knew I had a lot of work to do to go fly an expedition. So medical courses, because medical training is a little more important when you're going to be up there for half a year. So a lot of things that be like going back to get another master's degree. Mm-hmm. or more in front of me if I decided to do that. And I said no, and then one of my colleagues called me one night and said, are you crazy? Do you know how many people would like to have the golden ticket to just be able to say, I want to go do a long... And looking back on it, I'm really glad I did it, because I wasn't a shuttle pilot on that flight, but I saw a whole different experience.
Oh, sure.
Right? With the long term, all those weekends, and working with crews for the long term, and I got to know a lot more about the space station There were things when I flew as a space shuttle pilot.
Yeah.
I didn't even know what they were inside the space station. Nobody even taught me. I just looked at stuff up. I don't have any clue what that is. But when I flew as a space station crew member and commander, I knew where every fire port was, where every fire extinguisher was, where every switch is. I could look at a light on the ceiling and I'd say this one is powered by the 2A channel, by the 2A solar array. I knew if a light went out, which power channel had gone out. So
wow.
Yeah, I got to learn the space station in a way that I wouldn't have as a shuttle pilot.
Yeah, I'm sure that's a good experience to have. I mean, what was the difference between flying out of the U.S. versus flying out of Russia?
Well, in many ways, very similar.
Okay.
So everything I learned on shuttle was valuable background, but the rocket was different. The way it's operated is different. The training, the quarantine leading up to it. Just being just the fact that when you fly out of Florida, everybody and have been around for years is around you the whole time, all the way out to the launch pad almost. And when you fly out of Russia, you actually travel over there a month and a half or so before your flight, right? So you got to say goodbye to family and friends and so forth a long time ahead, and then you go over there and you finish meeting in Star City, Russia, and then you go on down to Baikonur, and you get down there at least a week before the launch.
Yeah.
So that you can do some training with the real vehicle and some fit checks and so forth. So the expedition you're in the launch flow, if you will, final count like months ahead of time, and not so much true with the shuttle.
Yeah.
But the shuttle, you really interface with the vehicle a lot more. We could see, for example, what the thrust was on the engines when we lifted off. In the Soyuz, you're in a vehicle that's being delivered to space by a rocket.
Okay.
We didn't have any insight at all into the rocket. So nothing whatsoever. We could see that the power systems and everything in our Soyuz spacecraft were healthy, but we couldn't see the thrust on the engines or anything like that.
Yeah.
So we could see if the escape system was armed or not. In fact, I told you, one of the first things I did on the shuttle was I looked to see if we had the speed to stay in space.
Right.
The way you find out on the Soyuz is ground tells you.
Okay.
We had a nominal insertion velocity. There's nothing on the Soyuz that tells you that. So different, and it's closer quarters, very tight. In both cases, though, it was about 2 full days for me to get from space to get to the vehicle to actually dock with the space station. So the space shuttle was kind of hold its attitude, and you kind of do some inspections with the robotic arm and so forth, and some burns and so forth to get there, and a lot of time really kind of to look out the window as you're on the going. On the Soyuz, you're just in a tiny little. It's a little bit like being inside maybe a little Volkswagen minibus or something like that in terms of the space and the three of you.
Yeah.
And they don't leave the flight control system on the whole time. Instead, they give it a little spin, and that holds the solar rays perpendicular to the sun as you orbit the Earth. And so it's got a little spin. It actually spins once every 2 minutes, and some people don't like that. For whatever reason, I didn't mind that. But it's quiet, and you're not talking to the ground at all.
Interesting.
Whereas the space shuttle, you can talk to the ground almost all the time. There are little gaps where they hand over between satellites, but you can, if you wake up in the middle of the night, you can talk to Houston if you want to. In the Soyuz, we could only talk to ground control when we flew over Russia, so only just for a little bit of each orbit. The ones that pass over Russia, and then as the day goes by, you actually do some orbits where you don't even go anywhere near Russia. Instead, you're passing over Australia in the southern hemisphere when you're on that side of the planet. You have lots of orbits in a row. Maybe like 8 or 10 or 12 where you can't talk to anybody. You're just in there by yourself, doing your thing. It was kind of nice not to have the chatter,
Sure.
and the commitment to always be communicating. So
Yeah.
we're just hanging out by ourselves and telling jokes and brushing our teeth and looking for something to eat. You know? So different ways, and then of course coming home, the shuttle comes back and lands like an airplane.
Yeah. Okay.
Very, very choreographed plan to either land in Florida. We actually landed in California because Florida weather was bad for 2 days in a row. So we ultimately came back to Edwards Air Force Base in California, which is where I was when I was 22 years old. When I told you I took that job at the Flight Test Center, between college and pilot training, that's where I worked. So I was so familiar with Edwards that I was like, hey, watch out. Sometimes they have skydivers, over the California City Airport over there. So we don't want to hit the skydivers with our space shuttle. That's true. They did have divers. Of course, they wouldn't be at the altitude we were at coming in.
Right.
But it was nice to be back. It was like my home field.
Sure.
I know all the runways there by heart. I know all the taxiways by heart. And I knew a lot of the people that were there to shake my hand when I got off the space shuttle. So that was kind of cool landing out there. The downside was my family was all in Florida. So I didn't get to see the actual landing. So it was, we come back, we enter it much steeper. It comes, you get down much faster and you land under a parachute. So just land in the middle of a big prairie, the steppe of Kazakhstan, we call it. And there's no rocks, no trees, no hills, just prairie grasslands. And you just land in the grass with a big parachute and some little thrusters that fire at about 2 feet above the ground to try to soften your landing. But you come down with a thud. And the parachute, we release the parachute, and we wait for somebody to come get us out.
Yeah, interesting.
So, yeah, but in both cases, from the time you start to come down to get down, it's about the same. We could get down with the Soyuz spacecraft during the expedition. If we wanted to get to the ground, we could hop in it and be to the surface of the Earth in just an hour or two. If we wanted to get to some safe landing zone, you might have to wait for the orbit to line up. So, but you could get in your Soyuz, get away from the space station. Let's say there was a big catastrophe or it was, a fire or a toxic ammonia spill or something inside. Then we could get off of it and deorbit back to Kazakhstan sometime within the day or something like that. So, space station is really, it's only 250 miles up there.
Yeah.
So you can get back to the atmosphere pretty quickly if you need to get back to the atmosphere quickly. Not so true, for future missions when we go deeper into space and stuff.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Let's see. I guess next, I got a couple things I want to do. I'd like to get a kind of a brief summary about what you've done since your career as an astronaut kind of ended. And then I'll have some big picture questions for you, kind of reflecting on things.
Okay. That sounds good. Well, I kind of always had a little bit of a fantasy. I did get, when I was in the Air Force, I got my PhD through the Air Force Institute of Technology. And I always kind of thought, one good job to take into your mid-70s and maybe even up to 80 would be like a university job.
Yeah.
And so I had tried to make some connections and stuff like that for taking a university job. So I left that office in early 16 and decided to try academia for a while. And for some personal reasons, I took a job in Norway at a university there, NTNU, as a technical university. And I taught college students and so forth, but I kind of realized that academia is one of those things where you need some decades in it.
Yeah.
Really, to get tenure and to be one of the boys, for lack of a better way to say it.
Yeah.
People are respected for what they've done in academia, how many papers they've published,
Sure.
and and people my age have published hundreds, And
Yeah.
so having been an astronaut was some kind of a special qualification to some people, but not to everybody, right?
Yeah.
Other people are like looking at you, like, so what? So you're a race car driver, what do you got to offer the structures department?
Yeah. Sure.
So even though I liked it, and of course, it wasn't kind of my what shall I say, my specialty and everything. So I was kind of relearning again how all that works, and there's politics involved and so forth too. So
yeah,
all good stuff. But I happened to go to a pilot training reunion for my Mississippi pilot training from 1980, from late 1982 and 83, and there were about 40 guys there. I told them what I was doing, and they said, "You know what you should do is if you want to make money, you could do the academia, and you could be an airline pilot too."
Yeah.
So airline pilots, like, we fly like 12 days a month, and you're really getting paid for what you can do and what you have a license to do. There's certainly a high level of professional commitment to making sure you're good at it too. But you have free time, and it pays really well. And we really need pilots.
Sure.
And so, one of the guys was kind of a manager at United Airlines. Worked in Denver. He's like, "Hey, if you want in, there's a certain amount of like silver coupons we have, or what do they call it, a silver certificate or something. I can try to slide you in. You probably could, it's still going to take 6 or 8 months to get here, but if you want to fly for United, I could probably try to make it work."
Yeah.
And so he did that for me, and I went, and I came back to Indianapolis. Actually, went out there to Metro Airport, the very first place I ever landed in an airplane.
Oh wow!
With my brother David many years ago. It's called something different now. I'm trying to think what it's called. Right? Or maybe it is. It's I can dig it up over here, but it's there around the Fishers area, I think.
Yeah.
And I did my ATP there, my airline transport pilot training, and got my check ride in a twin engine airplane. So I got my certificate that I needed to apply to United. And while I was there, I just got my tail dragger qualification too. You need a special license to fly airplanes with where the tail wheel is on the ground.
Yeah.
So I did that with that school, and then applied to United and got hired in the summer of 2018, and still to this day. In fact, while we just took our little break, I looked to see if there were flights available for me to take in the coming days with United. I work as a 757, 767 pilot.
Okay.
Now and fly out of Houston, so it's very convenient for me. Fly a lot of South American routes and some domestic routes and so forth like that. So anyway, I did that training, and to fly with them, I had to come back to the U.S. And I looked a little bit at maybe Embry-Riddle or something of that nature, like more like an aviation school, or even Purdue. I actually flew into Purdue in my little airplane once and landed at the airport there, and went and looked around a little bit, tried to think about whether I'd like to do something with one of those professional aviation type schools. Aligns a little bit more with what I did than just pure like structural engineering or something like that. But while that was happening, I got offered a job back with NASA too, to work part-time with this ISS advisory committee. And so, believe it or not, I already had a meeting before this conversation this morning with colleagues in Russia.
Oh, okay.
We do them early morning here because it's late afternoon in Russia.
Yeah.
And so I work with this joint commission.
Mm-hmm.
It's been around for about I don't know. Let's see, since at least about 75, 80 time frame. So it's been going strong for about 30 plus years, and we get together twice a year in person, and more often than not on the telephone, and we talk about American-Russian issues, space station, how long we're going to actually operate it together.
Yeah.
If you guys want to do this program, let's say you're going to fly up tourists, just how they'll fit in with when our tourists go. If we're gonna, because we're getting ready to start flying some private astronauts up and down.
Yeah.
And in fact, this morning we were just talking about they're getting ready to fly this new module, this multi-logistic, or it's a kind of a laboratory module. And we're going to fly our Boeing commercial crew flight also into July. So we're gonna just looking at timing and deconflicting and those sorts of things. So
yeah.
So I had worked with this committee as an active astronaut, and they brought me back on board to do that too. So they're both really, the United job is a full-time job, but I'm a young guy, so I fly weekends almost always.
Yeah.
And then I have a little time during the week to fly, just do part-time work with the ISS advisory committee. So that's what I'm doing now, and I enjoy, of course, doing both things. One of them is flying big airplanes and doing flight operations. While you were all watching fireworks on July 4th, I was in a simulator at United Airlines in Denver.
Okay.
Trying to figure out how to fly an airplane without any airspeed or altimeters. So that's one of the exercises we did.
Interesting.
So,
okay.
There's a lot of things you can do in simulators that we never would do in real airplanes, just in case, right?
Yeah, sure.
We have certain scenarios. So the two jobs fit together really nicely, and still in Houston. I wouldn't have to stay here, but it's kind of where I was. Most of my friends are. I have an astronaut that was right across the street from me.
Okay.
I was over there last night for dinner.
Yeah.
And so this is where I am with my current situation.
Yeah, that's cool. It sounds like a pretty good deal.
Yeah, it's a good deal. Mm-hmm.
And I guess at one point you were the director of the Yuri Gagarin Cosmonaut Training Center as well.
Yeah, so we called it the director of operations, but it was really for the U.S. side.
Okay.
Of course, not really. The director is a Russian.
Right. Okay.
So a lot of times so it's actually a whole Russian operation over there. They have a hydro lab too, where they train for underwater training and a centrifuge and simulators and so forth. A lot of workers there, but we did always have an American administrative staff there.
Oh, okay.
Because we had, while I was training, we often had 10 astronauts living there, right there on the center. We had some cottages built back during the Mir program for us to stay in. So we could even leave our suitcases and clothes there and stuff for astronauts in training, because we would go over there quite often.
Yeah.
So we were back and forth a lot. So that particular job, I was there for a whole year, and I was the guy who, okay, Mike Fink is coming over here for training, and he just slipped 2 weeks, and he's going to be here the same time as Leroy, and I'm going to, I have to, they were both going to be in the same time, so I got to find a different arrangement for them, and make sure they have the pickups. So we had an astronaut there all the time, just to kind of keep the other astronauts happy, administratively.
Yeah.
You can make sure they could go out to dinner when they wanted to, and help them with their whole general situation and training. And a lot of dignitaries would come over for launches and landings, so we would make sure that they had pickups at the airport and all that stuff. So I guess they thought if they had an astronaut to answer to all the U.S. requirements, that we'd be a little more under the gun and responsive, because we wanted to fly in space someday. So
sure, yeah.
So I did that job for an entire year. I went just after New Year's in January of 2004, and stayed there until 2 days before Christmas.
Yeah,
and I came home. And I was there the entire time. And then with the training I did then for my expedition later, and I became kind of the office representative for Soyuz operations too. So
yeah, okay.
I was over there for other astronauts exams and stuff. So I spent over 2 years of my life easily in Russia.
Yeah. Wow.
So yeah.
And given your experiences, and I guess the current work you still have on that sort of joint commission, how do you see the relationship between the U.S. and Russia when it comes to the space program developing over time?
If you were to look at it from a technical point of view,
yeah,
you would say, "Wow, what a great relationship."
Yeah.
From a political point of view, we're always trying to overcome this and that.
Sure.
As you know.
Yeah.
politicians on both sides don't necessarily think that space is the highest priority.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
So we do, and it's kind of our business. So we try to push to keep it together. But there's things. We're starting to fly crews now again on SpaceX and Boeing vehicles.
Yeah.
And so since the space shuttle retired in 2011, the Russians put our astronauts on space station.
Yeah.
Some people outside the program, especially, you see it in the news. We're hitching rides with the Russians. Well, we didn't look at it that way. We looked at it as, hey, these guys. Well, we don't have a vehicle. These guys are providing the crew transportation.
Yeah.
And the lifeboat, in case we have to come home in a hurry.
Yeah.
And they shared that technology that they had and that safe system. I just read the Russians haven't lost a cosmonaut in space flight for 50 years.
Right.
And we can't say that.
Yeah.
We're not that good.
Right.
It's not. We've had some great vehicles, but we haven't had that safety success. And they have it for a reason, because they're very technically savvy and everything. And so
Sure.
the relationship together, they do the space station reboosts when we need to change altitude, or if there's let's say they say, hey, you know what, we might hit this rocket in 12 hours. And if we want to change the space station altitude or dodge this, the Russians supply that ability.
Yeah.
They have that. On the other hand, we supply all the electrical power to them. So it's really a great relationship in space. The struggles we have are with, in other areas of life, we have some challenges.
Sure.
With the politics, and also just with the competitiveness in certain ways. And so that's kind of why the Joint Commission is here, and we have some value, and we all know each other. I know that the names of all the commission members on the other side, and I've known them for years, and been to restaurants and driven the same car with them and everything. And there's some value in having that relationship.
Yeah.
So technically, we really would be wise to try to keep it going. But sometimes, philosophically and politically, we have some challenges to overcome.
Yeah, I understand.
It just is what it is, as you say.
Yeah.
So you can't. Space doesn't drive everything that happens in the world, unfortunately.
Yeah. Let's see. What would you say the public does not know about NASA or space travel and how those operations happen and stuff? What do you think the biggest misconceptions are?
There's a lot of them. I don't think the average citizen could really tell you where the space station flies. For example, they might not understand that there's even people on it right now, or that there have been for we've had people in space now for 20 years. Yeah. Since Halloween of 2000, there's been people in space. So unfortunately, they also don't, like people say, "Or do you go to the moon? How close are you to the moon?" Just kind of the basics about the solar system in a lot of cases, a lot of public doesn't know about. Yeah. I was reading just this week that maybe you've heard Jeff Bezos is getting ready to fly.
Yes, I heard that.
His it's kind of a suborbital vehicle that will in fact go to the area that we call space above the atmosphere. Yeah. But his ability to stay in space is zero. Okay. It's kind of like shooting an arrow up into the sky and it's coming back down, right? Okay. To orbit the Earth, you have to have a great deal of horizontal speed so that you can make these circles and stay above the atmosphere all the way around. So there's a big difference in the amount of energy it takes for Jeff Bezos to go fly. It's still very remarkable. Don't get me wrong. Oh, sure, yeah. I'm gonna be glued to that TV. Yeah. Same with Virgin Galactic out in New Mexico. So Richard Branson getting ready to fly that too. So it's amazing. But I saw the public saying, "Well, we're all voting that he stays in space." Well, he can't stay in space suborbital if he wants to.
Right.
He's going to just be hanging above the surface of the Earth, 80 miles high, and he is coming back down.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the actual the principles, the first principles that have been set in place aren't supported. He can't stay there if he wants to. So just kind of, and I don't blame anybody for it, because unless you've really studied kind of orbital mechanics and stepped back and taken some real time with it, you're not going to understand it completely.
Yeah.
But I think just in general, the things we talk about day to day in the meetings, the technical details of flying in space. The extreme temperatures that we're talking about, with the sun shining on one side of the space station, it heats it up like it's the inside of your oven.
Yeah.
And on the other side, it cools it down like even colder than anybody on Earth has ever been, maybe minus hundreds of degrees. Right? It's just in the shade. So the thermal problems, the power problems. How orbits change and the challenges of that, all are kind of outside the normal, the knowledge base of the general population, unfortunately. But we try to teach, all we can and explain it where we can and sort of thing. So I don't think there's very much appreciation for how hard it is. But again, that is what it is too. The more success you have, the more people start to take it for granted. So, but we know about the dangers and the risks and everything like that at our level a lot more than most people do.
Yeah, sure. No, that makes sense. What, in your opinion, would you say is the most important work of NASA?
Well, the technology development, I think, you could argue that the kinds of communication systems we have and the digitalization, if you will, and cellular technologies and iPhone, microchips and stuff like that is largely driven in big part by the developments we try to do to solve problems in space. So
yeah.
There's been a lot of contributions to the way we live our lives right now from space flight. There are, though, many potential kind of like revolutionary possibilities from finding. One of the things I did on my flight was we took up some Medaka fish, which have bones like mammals.
Okay.
So osteoblasts and osteoclasts that create and destroy bone and so forth, that happen in these fish the way they do in mammals. Most fish have different kind of bone structure, but these fish have mammal type. And these are the issues we have with osteoporosis, for example, in life. If you think about the general population, we just kind of accept that osteoporosis is going to be part of our when we're in our 80s, right?
Right.
We're gonna walk different. We're not gonna stand up as straight. We're all gonna get shorter, but it doesn't have to be. If we figure out how to deal with this generation of bone cells and so forth, the way they're created, we could eliminate osteoporosis like we did leprosy and so forth.
Yeah.
And so we could all have a lot healthier adult lives. So even if you spent $100 billion on the space station, you divide that by 7 or 8 billion people, you're like, okay, for 25, maybe $20 each or something like that, we can all not have osteoporosis. I'm in for that.
Yeah, sure.
So there's a lot of stuff going on with viruses and new understandings of how fireworks actually cool flames, experiments and stuff. They found that combustion in space can happen by accident. They found that can happen at much, much cooler temperatures than we imagined before, where you're actually getting combustion. And so there's a lot of potential for kind of revolutionary developments.
Yeah.
It's just one of those things. Hey, can we spend a little bit, just maybe one penny out of every dollar to kind of investigate some stuff
Yeah.
that might make life better.
Yeah.
And that's what NASA does. So part of it's also trying to go deeper and being better at leaving the planet, so that we can go out there and explore. And there's a lot of value in that too, because we all want to do that, right? We all want to go.
Sure.
We all want to go see what's on the other side of that hill. And
yeah.
That's our nature as humans.
Definitely.
So it's kind of the human condition to want to get out there and live a full life and see what's out here before we depart.
Yeah, no, definitely makes sense. Yeah.
So as a race, it's a lot of fun. That's a little bit more of a philosophical side of it, but I think that's important too.
Oh, definitely. No, I absolutely agree.
Yeah.
It's necessary to get that perspective. How would you summarize your time as an astronaut overall, looking back on it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm really happy with my 2 flights. I would have loved to have flown the space shuttle like 7 times,
Yeah, sure.
Because I really liked going up and coming down. Like, to me, the ascent was really cool, and the entry, the way they learned to fly that space shuttle home and land on a runway, it's almost like magic to me. So I enjoyed it from a personal point of view, and I do feel like the space program is one of those things that's just really important to people, not just in the U.S., but to people, in the middle of the Amazon, and it's important to people in Central Africa and stuff too, that we learn more about our planet. So we've learned a tremendous amount of things about Earth and space and everything that is real. It's really what surrounds us and everything, and it's important for everybody to have that perspective. So I'm proud to have participated in that particular endeavor of America.
Definitely.
So I'm happy that I lived in this age where I'm glad I came. We just visited Kitty Hawk about eight months ago. I'm really lucky I came after the Wright brothers. So
yeah,
I don't know what I would have really done with my life if it hadn't been for flying and stuff. But I guess I would have found something. So, and every corner of life is fascinating to me, and what people do, and so So, but you got to pick something. I guess if I came back for another pass, if I hadn't done it before, I'd do space again. But maybe if I had done space and they just said, okay, you got another 80 years, what are you going to do? Maybe education or
right.
I don't know if maybe medicine or something like that. Maybe the second time around, but maybe the Navy instead of the Air Force, because I love the water too, and I love the ships, and there's so many things to learn in life, but we don't have the ability to be a specialist in everything.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. To what extent do you think being from Indiana helped shape your career as an astronaut?
I think, probably a little bit it was kind of work ethic, I suppose, to see the way my dad worked and the people around me and that sort of thing. I kind of got a perspective of if you want something, you kind of got to work for it. But I don't know, there's a certain amount of wholesomeness and honesty and everything from where I grew up and the people I grew up around that I think helped me in life. So it's kind of a little bit interesting. Wapakoneta, Ohio. Does that ring a bell with you? That's where Neil Armstrong grew up.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and it's actually on the exact same road that I grew up on. It has a different number because it crosses into the Ohio state line. But if you go to Montpelier, Indiana, and you head east, and you go 58 miles, you're downtown Wapakoneta.
Oh, wow.
And that's Neil Armstrong's house is, just right around the corner from there. And so mine's kind of like right around the corner. And I don't know, Gus Grissom, of course, is from Indiana, too.
Yeah.
And Purdue has a very strong space background. And I used to go to, back when it was called Bunker Hill even, we used to go to the air shows.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Over there. And I suppose, that environment exposed me to some things, and or maybe even you could say my oldest brother who learned to fly.
Yeah.
I wish I knew. He was a sitting Indiana senator from my area when he passed away. He passed away even younger than I am now.
Right.
But maybe there was some spark, when he was 17, 16, that said, hey, you know what? I want to fly airplanes. And then because he did that spark got passed on to me and made my career what it was. Gave me the spark too. So none of us can be sure exactly what got us to where we are.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Let's see. Last couple of questions for you, and then I'll let you go.
Okay.
What advice would you give to Hoosiers striving to become an astronaut or work for NASA?
So there's so many people from Indiana working with me at the Johnson Space Center and at Kennedy Space Center. So the advice I would give is just do it. You could do it.
Yeah.
I think when I was in high school, I underestimated what I could do in the world, and I think others do too. I always kind of felt like the athletes from my high school. We had some amazing athletes, but I don't know if they kind of went, and pursued their dreams to all the way to the professional level. There's a few of them who could have. I played Little League with guys who actually one of them did play for the Detroit Tigers for a little while.
Okay.
But I always felt like the attitude was kind of like, the big world, the professional world, the world on TV, that's not really for us.
Yeah.
But it turns out it can be, right?
Yeah. So
I'm not saying the TV thing is great, but I'm just saying to be able to leave home, to be able to grow up in Blackford County, Montpelier, Indiana, and then end up with two cosmonauts in a Russian rocket, launch into the space station. When I was in that rocket, I was thinking that. I was like, how did I even get here? Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So along the way, there were people who said, yeah, if you want to take the next step, you can take the next step. But when I was at the very lowest step in Blackford County, I didn't really think that was possible. So the advice I would give is, man, it is possible. Just keep working your way out and working your way up. And when NASA sends you the rejection letter, fly again the next time and keep going after it. And maybe the path you planned isn't exactly where you'll end up, but you can certainly find a lot of good options out there and maybe find a dream come true out there at some point. If you keep if the door closes, as they say, look for another open one. So find a way to do it. So all those people in my astronaut class and the people I work with in space, we all came from a little town. We probably all say just what I just said. I came from such a little place and a little school that nobody would have ever imagined that I could get the opportunity to do that. But somebody ends up having to do it, and everybody comes from someplace. So
absolutely. That's good
Yeah.
advice. Let's see. Last question. How has space travel changed, and where do you think the future of space travel is going?
So the space station program has really been remarkable because of our ability to learn to just stay in space and work in space and almost make it routine. But we do need it's a little bit like standing in ankle deep water at the beach.
Okay.
So we need to get on out there, some maybe really develop some better deep space systems, deep space rendezvous, deep space communications. Kind of life support needs to still get better and stuff, and we can do that in an area closer in the Earth Moon system. So we're going to set up this gateway out in the moon area. And now we're not an hour from being back in the atmosphere again, or in some cases maybe 8 or 10 days from getting home with whatever happens. And you have to factor that risk in and analyze that risk and account for that. So that's like going out into maybe water up to your neck, but at some point even phasing away from Earth-Moon system. A whole sun distance away maybe, but in the same orbit as the Earth-Moon might be, and get further away. At some point, we'll get better at propulsion.
Mm-hmm.
So I think chemical propulsion, where you dig it, you pull it out of the ground, and you pump it in tanks, and you burn it, and it's gone. That only takes you so far, right?
Right.
So even in your car or your Tesla, your gasoline car, Tesla, you put it in there and it runs. And now you have to do something to go on, right?
Yeah.
If you don't have the infrastructure to recharge it, so some kind of electric propulsion or sun-based propulsion, or stuff you can get from other planets. So in situ resource development, say on other planets or on the moon and stuff, has to be developed. And that's why it's a good idea to kind of go and spend some time on the moon. We have no idea what we would learn by setting up a kind of a permanent lunar habitation. We really don't. It's even the NASA engineers and stuff, it's a little bit beyond our imagination.
Yeah.
To see where we could end up, how we construct things, how we come and go safely, and all that stuff. So that's those are the next steps. And then at some point, if you can get even very, very low force propulsion, but you can leave it on, you can get really, really high speed, to travel through deep space. And instead of taking 6 months to get to Mars, like we talk about right now,
right,
propulsion, maybe we can get there in 2 weeks.
Wow.
And if you can come and go from Mars in a couple of weeks, because you can sustain just even, a few ounces or a few pounds of constant force or propulsion or something, you can really speed up the travel. So that's the next step. And then, what comes 1,000 years from now, neither you nor I can imagine.
Definitely.
Imagine, unfortunately, but it'll happen as long as we keep learning and taking steps forward.
Yeah, absolutely.
Pretty cool. I wish I could be given another 100 years in front of me.
Yeah, no, I understand. That's really cool. Well, I mean, thank you so much for being up to do this. I think this is a really fascinating talking with you, and I'm sure this conversation will be interesting for a long time now and in the future, when people look back and see what was going on in the heads of people involved in the space program and stuff, and how it's changed.
Yeah.
So.
Very good. Well, I'm happy to do it, for my home state and everything like that. So I'm honored that you cared enough to talk to me for this long. Hopefully you'll get some of my other colleagues. I think if you talk to like 10 or 12 Hoosier astronauts, you're going to get 10 or 12 very interesting perspectives. I'm going to go listen to every one of them as you put them online. So
yeah, sounds good.